The airport is already loud before anything goes wrong. There's the hum of conveyor belts, the clack of rolling suitcases, the constant, slightly panicked energy of people trying to be somewhere else. No one's making eye contact, and that's kind of the point. Emily has done this part in her head 100 times. Walk straight. Don't rush, don't linger. Smile when you're supposed to. Act like someone with nothing to hide, nothing at all. And keep repeating this mantra in line as it inches forward. But finally, she's given the directions. Shoes off, laptop out, bin on the belt. And then, ma'am, can you step aside for a moment? It's not loud. It's not a dramatic ask at all. It doesn't need to be. This is the moment where everything narrows, where the background noise drops out for Emily, where time slows down just enough to let her panic stretch its legs. She knows. She knows what's about to happen. There are people everywhere, but suddenly it feels like it's just her in that sentence. Ma'am, step aside. It's echoing over and over in her mind. A quiet phrase that sounds like a gunshot. They don't shout and they don't rush, and they don't need to. Everyone here will go home at the end of their day, but Emily O'Brien will not be going home. She knows what they'll find will end this version of her life. And standing there, fluorescent lights overhead, shoes in a plastic bin, she realizes something quietly devastating. This isn't a mistake she can undo. You're listening to True Crime Culinary. I'm your host, Leah Jack. Let's sink our teeth into this story. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of True Crime Culinary. I am Leah, your host, and this show is where we look at true crime stories and then pause to say, hey, wait a minute, where did that one thing come from? But we focus on food. Why? Because I love it. Toad's my fave. And I know I'm not the only one who loves food. Pretty sure most of my friends, also food lovers, but I wanted a way to share the fact that I love doing a deep dive, a fun, fast, and intense deep dive into random but very relevant things, often around food, often around people. So that's why I started this podcast, and I hope you'll follow me along. In today's story, it's not about murder. A lot of times I love doing murder true crime stories. I do love a survival story, but I also love kind of a comeback story, and that's what today's about. It's about pressure, it's about consequences, and it's about popcorn. I know, let me make it make sense. So, back to the airport with Emily O'Brien, a 26-year-old who's founded the company Gather. Now, that name sounded familiar. I didn't Google it, but it did sound familiar. She's successful, but she's struggling with mental health and substance abuse. And she put her trust in the wrong person. Much like Bridget Jones, she's on a short vacation. But unlike Bridget Jones, she is very aware of what she's been set up to do. She's not in favor of it, but she kind of felt pressure to do it. She didn't really have a way out. So she kind of just hoped it would be all a bad dream, but it wasn't. She'd been pressured into carrying drugs. She'd been caught, and now she was being sent to prison. Her life changed from traveling, parties, and working to a different rhythm. Prison had its own sounds and its own patterns. Days measured in counts and routines. Time that stretched in strange ways, too fast and too slow at the same time. And in there, stripped of distraction, stripped of momentum, something else happened. Reflection snuck in through a slow accumulation of small realizations, and she decided to get and stay clean. The prison Emily was in had 12 women and was sort of akin to house arrest. She observed that people came from all walks of life, all types of personalities. But the one thing everybody could connect on was food. With their $36 per week allowance, Emily gravitated towards popcorn. It's cheap, it's simple, and a little bit of seasoning can go a long way. But wait, before we find out what happens to Emily, let's talk about where this popular little kernel comes from. Because popcorn has always been a food tied to survival, resilience, and reinvention, long before movie theaters and snack aisles made it smell like butter and nostalgia. Popcorn is one of the oldest forms of corn humans intentionally cultivated. Archaeologists have found popcorn kernels with Inca and Aztec histories, over 3,000 years ago. I made that sound kind of Canadian, but maybe it's because I've gotten real deep in heated rivalry, but I digress. So, archaeologists have found popcorn kernels with Inca and the Aztec over 3,000 years ago, and that was not an accident. Early indigenous farmers already understood that this variety of maize behaved differently. In case you want to learn more about maize or corn, head to my episode, Stalker Among the Stalks. Talks a bit about it. Lovely episode. So let's start with the basics. Popcorn pops because its hull is strong enough to trap moisture inside. When it heats up, pressure builds, the starch gelatinizes. That seems like a word for Scrabble. And eventually, the kernel turns itself inside out, which honestly is kind of incredible. And side note, can you imagine the first person to witness that? Like, you're just heating grain over a fire and suddenly it explodes into white clouds. Did they think the sky was falling? Did they think it was magic? I need to know. I never will, but these are the thoughts I have. Recently, I thought a hotel doorbell was a gecko trapped in a vent. So I can spiritually and emotionally and physically align with said confusion that I imagine there was a mere 3,000 etc. years ago. But it wasn't passive nourishment. Popcorn was active, alive, and loud. Popcorn changed shape, it made noise, it became something else entirely, not unlike a butterfly. Then colonization happened. When Europeans arrived in the Americas, corn traveled with them, sometimes traded, sometimes taken, often misunderstood. Popcorn moved into colonial kitchens because it stored well and didn't require ovens or grinding stones. You could heat it in a pot, over a fire, on a shovel. By the 1700s, people were eating popcorn with milk or cream for breakfast, sweetened with honey or molasses. It became a staple for families who didn't have much else. And here's something I love. Popcorn has always been a working class food. It doesn't demand fancy equipment, it doesn't need refrigeration, and it doesn't spoil quickly. It waits patiently until heat shows up. So fast forward to the late 1800s, when street vendors started selling popcorn in cities using early hand-cranked machines. Suddenly, popcorn wasn't just survival food, it was entrepreneurial food. Portable, smelly, in the absolute best way, and super profitable. And then came the Great Depression. This is where popcorn really earns its reputation. When money dried up and luxuries disappeared, popcorn stayed. First, because sugar was mega expensive. Second, movies went from silent and needing literacy to read the subtitles to talkies, which everyone understood. So now you had a ton of people going to the theater who wanted a cheap snack. I have to say, this is one of my favorite factoids from this entire story, is the shift in how movies were shown and the cultural impact. Suddenly, it's not just for literate people who could afford an education, who had the money to go. It was like, I just love that storytelling aspect and how much of an impact it had on, you guessed it, popcorn. Because kernels were cheap, profit margins were super high, and vendors could sell bags for pennies and still make a living. Families who couldn't afford meat or sweets could still afford popcorn. So while everything else collapsed, popcorn quietly kept going. Well, I mean, like, not so quietly. Which is why movies originally hated it. It was too messy and it was too loud and, too low class. But the economics won. So popcorn didn't need refrigeration, it didn't require skilled labor, and it cost almost nothing to make. So by the 1930s and 1940s, popcorn wasn't just tolerated in cinemas, it was literally paying the bills. In fact, half of the American popcorn consumed was being consumed in movie theaters. So from there, it became what we know today, inseparable from public spaces, from distraction, from shared experiences. For me, also part of a bar that I went to a lot. I mean, just loved that they always had popcorn snacks in the corner. And this is also when popcorn gets merchandised. Up until the late 1800s, popcorn was mostly homemade or sold by street vendors popping kernels over open flames. But then came Charles Cretors, a candy maker from Chicago who basically changed everything. In 1893, he debuted the first steam-powered commercial popcorn machine at the World's Fair. And suddenly, popcorn wasn't just something you made at home. It became something you could produce consistently, cheaply, and in public. His machine popped kernels evenly, added butter automatically, and let people watch the process through glass panels, which is genius. I mean, who doesn't love watching popcorn? Because popcorn isn't just a snack, it's also a performance. So people could see it transform in real life, hear it popping, smell it from half a block away, and that visibility helped turn popcorn into a business. And from there, popcorn carts spread across cities, into fairs, into theaters, and into factories. So by the mid-19th century, popcorn was being mass-produced, prepackaged, flavored, branded, and marketed. Microwave popcorn arrived in the 1980s, making it even more accessible. Heat, wait, explode, food. Same pattern, different decade. And here's where things kind of took a darker turn for like the broad strokes, but still kind of like part of the overall interesting story. Popcorn's biggest strength, its bulk, its smell, its innocence, also makes it a very useful tool for what? Smuggling. In 2017, U.S. border agents intercepted a vehicle crossing from Mexico into California, carrying narcotics hidden inside popcorn boxes. Mind you, the driver, the person in charge, was a U.S. citizen before you get all like worked up. Over 150 pounds of meth were concealed inside what looked like ordinary snack packaging. Now that is an intense snack. No one expects crime to be wrapped in popcorn branding, and yet there it is. So once again, popcorn shows up exactly where pressure lives. At borders, in prisons, in economies under stress. That seems like an understatement. In moments where people are trying to move something or themselves across a line. Which brings us back to Emily. Once she was out of prison, having practiced magical combinations like lemon pepper and dill, she started the company Comeback Snacks. Popcorn so good, it's criminal. I really love that tagline. What's awesome is that it creates delicious snacks, but it's a company that employs people who spent time in prison. I think that's pretty cool because she turned pressure into potential and some delicious treats. So next time you look at a bowl of buttery popcorn, imagine what an amazing history it has and what you might have in common with Aztecs and Incas from thousands of years ago. After all, everyone loves a snack. Until next time, stay curious and be careful what's in your cup. Check out our show notes for sources, hit that subscribe button, rate and review the podcast anywhere you listen.